Have you ever wondered why some people remain trapped in endless cycles of struggle while others seem to effortlessly manifest peace, abundance, and joy? The difference isn't luck or circumstance. It's something far more profound happening beneath the surface of consciousness. What if I told you that a single shift in understanding could completely transform every aspect of your life? But before we begin, please hit the like button and let me know where in the world you're watching from today. It's always fascinating seeing who's joining us from around the globe. And if you haven't already, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any of our future videos. Has this ever happened to you? You work tirelessly to solve a problem, whether it's a health issue, a financial struggle, or a challenging relationship, only to find yourself facing the same patterns again and again, despite your best efforts. What if these persistent challenges aren't actually problems to be solved, but illusions to be dissolved through a deeper understanding of who you truly are? Most spiritual teachings offer techniques and practices to improve your human experience. But Joel Goldsmith discovered something far more revolutionary. You are not a human seeking spiritual experiences. You are divine consciousness, temporarily experiencing itself through human form. Stay with me until the end, because this profound shift in identity changes everything. When you truly understand the power of I am, you stop identifying with your personality, your past, your struggles, and your limitations. Instead, you recognize yourself as the very presence of God, expressing uniquely as you. This isn't positive thinking or affirmation. It's a radical recognition of what you have always been, but temporarily forgot. What you're about to discover might surprise you, because it contradicts much of what conventional wisdom tells us about spiritual growth. Most seekers spend years trying to manifest better circumstances, affirming prosperity, or visualizing health, all while still believing they are separate from the divine. But what if your problems aren't actually solved through spiritual techniques? What if they simply dissolve when you recognize your true divine nature? Think about shadows cast on a wall. You can't remove them by scrubbing the wall or covering them with paint. They disappear instantly when you turn on the light. Similarly, when you embrace the truth of I am, your problems don't get resolved through effort. They dissolve naturally because they were never real in spiritual truth. They were merely shadows cast by false identification with temporary conditions. This understanding isn't just philosophical, it transforms your entire experience of life. Imagine moving through your days without the burden of trying to fix, change, or improve your circumstances. Imagine knowing with unshakable certainty that the divine intelligence that creates galaxies is expressing itself as your individual life right now. If this exploration of the I am consciousness resonated with you, subscribe to join our community of spiritual seekers. Each video goes deeper into these timeless truths that transform how you experience every aspect of life. This journey of transformation reveals why many spiritual practices only create temporary results. Have you noticed how affirmations often feel like you're trying to convince yourself of something you don't quite believe? There's a profound revelation here. Most seekers make a critical error. They repeat, I am wealthy, or I am healthy, while still believing at a deeper level that they're separate human beings trying to manifest better conditions. The mindset shift that creates lasting change isn't about using I am as a manifestation technique. It's recognizing that the I that speaks those words isn't your personality at all. It's the same divine consciousness that spoke through Moses at the burning bush saying, I am that I am. It's the same Christ awareness that Jesus referred to when he said, before Abraham was, I am. This hidden truth completely reframes the spiritual journey. You're not using spiritual practices to improve your human experience. You're awakening to the divine consciousness that has been your true identity all along. The impact of this understanding goes far beyond surface-level changes in circumstance. It's a complete reversal of how you've perceived reality. Behind the scenes of every spiritual tradition, this single revelation has been the catalyst for the most profound transformations. The masters weren't teaching techniques to get more stuff. They were pointing to the unlimited nature of what you already are. The practical application is deceptively simple, yet revolutionary. Instead of thinking, I am sick or I am struggling financially, you learn to rest in the pure awareness of I am, without adding any qualifiers or conditions. This isn't denial or spiritual bypassing. It's allowing divine consciousness to express itself as your individual existence without the limitations imposed by false identification. Consider the difference between these two approaches. In one, you're a separate being repeating affirmations to attract better circumstances. In the other, you're resting in the recognition that divine wholeness is already expressing as you, needing no improvement or change. The decisions you make from this awakened state flow naturally from wholeness rather than from perceived lack. You no longer approach life as a series of problems to be solved, but as an expression of the infinite intelligence that's been orchestrating the universe long before you identified as a separate self. This understanding transforms how you move through challenges. When faced with illness, relationship difficulties, or financial pressure, instead of immediately thinking, how can I fix this problem? You first return to the awareness of I am, the unchanging consciousness that remains untouched by temporary conditions. From this place of pure awareness, solutions often appear that your problem-solving mind could never have conceived. It's like accessing a higher intelligence that sees pathways invisible to your ordinary thinking. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic by exploring how this understanding of I am doesn't just change your personal experience. It fundamentally transforms how you relate to everyone and everything in your life. Put in the comments, I am awareness, if you've ever experienced moments where you felt this pure consciousness beneath your thinking mind. One of the most profound revelations in this spiritual journey is discovering there's no separation between you and the infinite source of all good. This insight completely rewires your perception of reality. Every experience of lack, limitation, or fear you've ever had was based on a fundamental misunderstanding of your true nature. The divine I am that constitutes your real identity has never been sick, has never lacked anything, has never been afraid. This understanding breaks through the invisible barrier that seemed to stand between you and everything you've been seeking. The enlightenment process isn't about becoming something you're not. It's about uncovering the abundance, wholeness, and perfection that has always been your true nature beneath the disguise of human experience. Behind every spiritual breakthrough story is this same paradigm shift. People don't transform their lives by accumulating more knowledge or techniques. They experience a fundamental revelation about who they actually are. The mindset transformation happens when you stop seeing yourself as a separate human entity, trying to connect with some distant divine power, and recognize that divine power as your very essence. As you integrate this understanding, you naturally begin to experience life from an entirely different perspective. Joel Goldsmith called this the practice of the presence of God, but it could just as accurately be called remembering your true identity. The journey becomes less about bringing spiritual power into your problems and more about recognizing that what you are in your deepest truth is the very presence and power of the infinite itself. This practice creates a profound shift in how you navigate daily life. When challenges arise, whether physical symptoms, relationship difficulties, or financial pressures, your first response isn't to immediately try fixing the external condition. Instead, you return to the recognition of your true identity as divine consciousness, which remains untouched by temporary appearances. The impact of this understanding reverberates through every dimension of your existence. Decision-making becomes intuitive rather than stressful. Creative solutions appear naturally because you're accessing the same infinite intelligence that orchestrates the entire cosmos. Relationships transform as you begin seeing others not as separate personalities, but as unique expressions of the same divine consciousness you are. This isn't a theoretical concept, but a living practice, one that completely reorients your relationship with existence itself. You move from being a separate entity, struggling against life's currents, to being the awareness in which all experience appears and disappears. The liberation this brings is beyond words, yet it manifests as profound peace in everyday living. Now I want to explore how this understanding transforms your relationship with the material world, particularly in areas where people experience the greatest struggle, like health, wealth, and relationships. If you've ever experienced moments of feeling completely at peace despite external circumstances, type "I am peace" in the comments below. One of the most revolutionary aspects of understanding I am is how it completely transforms your relationship with the material world. When this awareness becomes your living reality, a profound shift occurs. You stop looking to the world to give you what you think you need. This represents a complete reversal in the flow of energy in your life. Most people operate from a mindset of lack, constantly seeking to acquire, achieve, or accumulate something they believe will make them complete. But this approach creates a perpetual cycle of seeking that never ends because it's built on a fundamental misconception about your nature. The breakthrough moment comes when you realize you already are the source of what you've been seeking. The ripple effect of this revelation touches every dimension of your experience. Your relationships transform because you're no longer trying to extract love, approval, or validation from others. Instead, you naturally express the love that you are. Your work becomes an outlet for service rather than a means to gain security or status. Your creative endeavors flow from abundance rather than from need for recognition. Subscribe now to continue your journey of spiritual awakening. When you join our community, you'll discover more powerful teachings that help you recognize and live from your true divine identity. This shift from getting to giving isn't something you have to force or practice. It emerges naturally as you recognize your true identity. It's like a spring naturally flowing outward once the blockages are removed. The mindset transformation happens at such a fundamental level that your entire orientation to life changes without effort. A powerful illustration of this principle appeared in the journey of a woman who had struggled with chronic illness for years. Her story reveals the essence of true healing. After exhausting every medical treatment, spiritual technique, and healing modality available, she remained trapped in suffering because she was still operating from a fundamental misunderstanding about her nature. The pivotal moment in her healing journey wasn't finding the right treatment. It was the revelation that her true identity as divine consciousness had never been sick and could never be sick. The body is simply an appearance in consciousness, like an image projected on a screen. When you change the projector, your consciousness, the image changes automatically. This understanding of healing goes far beyond positive thinking or visualization techniques. It's not about trying to heal what appears to be broken. It's about awakening to the truth that your essential nature has never been touched by any condition or circumstance. The impact of this revelation isn't just physical healing, it's complete liberation from the belief that you could ever be separate from wholeness. Behind the scenes of every genuine healing is this same fundamental shift in identity. Rather than seeing yourself as a damaged human seeking restoration, you recognize yourself as divine consciousness temporarily, experiencing a limited human perspective. From this awakened state, Healing isn't something you achieve, it's something you remember. Now let me share how this understanding of I am creates a revolutionary approach to abundance and success that defies conventional wisdom about manifestation. If you've experienced moments where you felt complete just as you are, without needing to add or change anything, type I am complete in the comments. The understanding of I am extends powerfully into the professional realm, creating a complete paradigm shift in how success is approached and achieved. Consider the journey of a businessman who revolutionized his entire enterprise simply by starting each day resting in the awareness of I am before engaging with any business activities. The transformation wasn't just philosophical, it manifested in tangible results that defied conventional business wisdom. Prior to this awakening, he operated like most entrepreneurs, driven by fear of failure, constantly stressed about competition, and working endless hours trying to create security through external achievement. The hidden truth he discovered was that he had been approaching success backward, trying to extract security from his business instead of bringing security to his business from his true identity. The revelation came when he began making decisions from an entirely different consciousness. Rather than asking, "What will protect me from loss?" or "How can I beat the competition?" he naturally began operating from questions like, "What would best serve everyone involved?" and "What is trying to emerge through this situation?" This shift in mindset completely transformed his leadership style, corporate culture, and business results. Behind the scenes of every truly successful venture is this same principle at work. When you operate from the consciousness of abundance rather than scarcity, you naturally make decisions that create more value for everyone involved. This isn't a technique or strategy. It's the natural expression of your divine identity when it's not obscured by fear-based thinking. This same principle creates equally powerful transformations in relationships. Many people approach relationships from a fundamental misconception, believing that love is something they need to get from others. They evaluate relationships based on what they're receiving, constantly feeling disappointed when others don't fulfill their emotional needs or expectations. The breakthrough moment comes when you stop trying to get love from others and start expressing the love that you are as divine consciousness. This shift isn't about giving to get. It's about recognizing that love isn't something you receive, it's something you are. The impact of this understanding ripples through every relationship in your life. A woman who had been married for 20 years discovered this truth and watched her relationship transform completely. She had spent 2 decades trying to change her husband, feeling frustrated and unloved. When she stopped judging his behavior and started seeing him as the divine consciousness he truly is, beneath all his human personality patterns, everything changed. Their relationship healed not because he changed, but because she started relating to him from truth instead of from her wounded ego. This revelation applies to every relationship in your life: family, friends, colleagues, even strangers. When you see others as divine consciousness, temporarily confused about their identity, just as you once were, you naturally become a healing presence. You're no longer triggered by their human behavior because you're relating to their essential nature rather than their temporary personality. Let me share how this understanding of I am transforms how we approach life's greatest challenges and difficulties. If you've experienced a relationship transform when you changed how you saw the other person, type I am love in the comments. The I do power of understanding I am extends beyond personal transformation. It fundamentally alters how you influence others and create healing in relationships. When you consistently see others through the lens of their divine nature rather than their human problems, you create an atmosphere where transformation naturally occurs without manipulation or control. A mother discovered this truth while facing one of life's most heartbreaking challenges, watching her son struggle with addiction. Despite years of trying every approach from tough love to endless support, nothing seemed to help. The breakthrough came when she shifted her focus from trying to fix her son's behavior to holding an unwavering awareness of who he truly was beneath the addiction. Every day she would quietly rest in the recognition that the I am expressing as her son was perfect, whole, and complete, temporarily confused about his identity, but never damaged or broken. This wasn't denial or passive acceptance. It was seeing past temporary appearances to the unchanging divine consciousness that constituted his true being. The hidden truth she discovered was that her consciousness became a healing sanctuary, a space where her son could reconnect with his own divine nature without judgment or pressure. Within months, without intervention from her, he began making different choices and seeking help. The revelation here goes beyond parenting. It applies to every relationship and interaction in your life. This approach to healing others represents a complete paradigm shift from conventional wisdom. Instead of trying to change people's behavior through advice, persuasion, or manipulation, you hold the space of truth for them by seeing their essential nature beyond all appearances. This creates an invisible field of possibility where their own awakening can emerge naturally. Through practicing this awareness with yourself and others, you make another profound discovery. You are not your thoughts, emotions, or physical sensations. You are the unchanging awareness in which all experiences appear and disappear. This realization brings a stability that transforms your entire experience of life. Joel Goldsmith called this the consciousness of truth, a way of living from your spiritual identity, regardless of changing circumstances. The impact of this understanding becomes most evident during life's greatest challenges. When difficulties arise, instead of being tossed about by changing conditions, you rest in the stability of knowing who you truly are. This doesn't mean you become detached or indifferent to life's experiences. Rather, you engage with them from a deeper dimension of your being, the unchanging awareness that remains constant while thoughts, emotions, and circumstances continuously shift. The journey of spiritual awakening ultimately leads to this profound recognition. You are not what changes. You are the unchanging witness of all change. Now I want to explore how this understanding transforms how we approach abundance and material success in a world obsessed with accumulation and achievement. If you've ever experienced moments where you felt completely stable despite chaotic circumstances around you, type "I am stability" in the comments. The understanding of I am completely transforms your relationship with abundance and material prosperity. When most people think about abundance, they imagine accumulating resources from outside themselves. More money, possessions, or opportunities. But this approach perpetuates a fundamental misconception that keeps people trapped in cycles of lack and limitation. The revelation that creates lasting abundance is recognizing that you are not separate from the source of all supply. The divine I am that constitutes your true identity isn't rich or poor. It's the infinite source from which all prosperity flows. This shift in perspective changes everything about how you relate to the material world and your needs. This understanding doesn't mean money will magically appear without practical action. Instead, it means you take action from an entirely different consciousness, from the awareness of abundance rather than from the desperation of lack. The decisions you make, the opportunities you recognize, and the value you create all transform when you operate from this awakened state. Consider how different your experience would be if you genuinely knew that the same infinite intelligence that coordinates galaxies and sustains ecosystems is fully capable of meeting your needs through perfect channels. This confident expectancy isn't wishful thinking. It's based on the direct recognition of your true identity and its relationship to all of life. The breakthrough realization is that abundance isn't something you achieve or attract. It's what you are in your essential nature. Every experience of lack has been the result of identifying with the limited human perspective rather than with the unlimited divine consciousness that you truly are. This mindset transformation doesn't just change your financial circumstances, it liberates you from the anxiety and fear that accompany the belief in limitation. Perhaps the most profound aspect of understanding I am is how it transforms your experience during life's greatest challenges and crises. This is where the rubber meets the road in spiritual understanding. Can you maintain your recognition of truth when everything in the human experience seems to be falling apart? In moments of crisis, instead of getting lost in fear or desperately trying to figure out solutions with your limited human mind, you can rest in the awareness that divine consciousness is never in crisis. The eternal I am that you are remains untouched by temporary human circumstances, regardless of how challenging they appear. This understanding doesn't lead to passive acceptance of difficult conditions. Rather, it gives you access to a higher intelligence that can respond to challenges from wisdom instead of from panic. Solutions often appear that your problem-solving mind could never have conceived because you're operating from a different dimension of awareness. The journey of awakening ultimately reveals an unshakable peace that doesn't depend on external circumstances being a certain way. This isn't a peace you achieve. It's the peace that is already the nature of your true identity when it's not obscured by identification with temporary human concerns and problems. Now, I want to explore how this understanding of I am unleashes creativity and authentic expression in ways that transform not just your experience, but your contribution to the world. If you've experienced moments of profound peace during difficult circumstances, type I am serenity in the comments. Understanding I am opens entirely new dimensions of creativity and authentic expression. When you create from the awareness of your divine nature rather than from the personal ego, something remarkable happens. You become a channel for infinite intelligence to express itself uniquely through your individual gifts and talents. This transformation in the creative process goes far beyond technique or skill development. An artist discovered this truth after years of struggling with creative blocks and doubting her abilities. Despite her technical mastery, her work felt forced and inauthentic, until she had a profound realization about the true source of creativity. Instead of trying to generate original ideas from her limited human mind, she began allowing divine consciousness to express itself through her art without interference from personal agendas or the need for recognition. The revelation she experienced was that creativity isn't something you have to struggle to produce. It's the natural expression of the divine consciousness that you are. When she rested in the awareness of I am before beginning her work, inspiration and creative energy flowed effortlessly. Her artwork became more powerful and authentic because it wasn't filtered through the limited perspective of personal fear or the desire to impress others. This principle applies to every form of creative expression. Whether you're an artist, writer, musician, entrepreneur, parent, or anyone seeking to live more authentically, the breakthrough insight is that you don't need to force creativity or originality. When you recognize yourself as divine consciousness, you become an open channel through which infinite creativity naturally expresses itself in completely unique ways. The journey of awakening to I am ultimately leads to the most profound transformation of all, the end of seeking itself. After years or even lifetimes of spiritual searching, the startling discovery is that what you've been seeking has been what you are all along. You're not a human having occasional spiritual experiences. your spiritual consciousness having a temporary human experience. This recognition brings a profound peace that nothing else can provide, because the restless seeking that has driven so much of human experience simply stops. You're no longer trying to get to some future state of enlightenment or spiritual achievement. You're resting in the completeness and perfection that you have always been, but simply hadn't recognized until now. Joel Goldsmith called this the end of the journey and the beginning of life. When you stop seeking to become spiritual and start living from the spirituality that you are, your entire existence transforms. Life becomes an authentic expression of joy and service rather than a struggle to achieve or prove something. You're free to be yourself without apology or explanation. This doesn't mean you stop growing, learning, or serving. It means you do all these things from wholeness rather than from lack, from love rather than from fear, from the abundance of what you are rather than from the poverty of what you think you lack. The mindset shift is complete. You move from being a spiritual seeker to being a living expression of the truth you've discovered. Now I want to explore how this understanding of I am transforms your approach to life's greatest challenges, and how it becomes a practical living reality rather than just a philosophical concept. If you've experienced that moment of recognizing you already are what you've been seeking, type "I am home" in the comments. As we bring this exploration of the I am consciousness to a close, I'm reminded of something Joel Goldsmith often said, that true understanding doesn't come from intellectual knowledge alone, but through living the truth we've discovered. The journey of awakening to your divine identity continues long after this video ends, unfolding in each moment of your daily life. If these insights have resonated with something deep within you, perhaps that's because they're awakening a truth you've always known, but temporarily forgot. Your presence here wasn't an accident. There's a reason these teachings found their way to you today. I'd love to continue this journey together. Subscribe to join our community of spiritual explorers who are rediscovering their true identity beyond the limitations of human conditioning. When you subscribe, you'll receive more teachings that build upon this foundation of truth we've established today. If this message spoke directly to your heart, leave a comment saying, "I am awakening," so I know these teachings have found their home with you. Your comment not only helps others find this content, but creates a beautiful tapestry of shared recognition as we all remember who we truly are. Give this video a like if you felt that sense of recognition, that moment where something within you whispered yes to the truth being shared. Each like helps these teachings reach others who are ready for this understanding. There's a video right here that explores how to practically apply the I am consciousness in relationships that might be challenging you right now. Click and continue with me over there as we take this understanding even deeper into the fabric of your daily life. The journey continues, and I'm grateful to be walking it with you. For over 2,000 years, Jesus' command to love your enemies has been taught as the ultimate moral test, a divine standard so impossibly high that most of us accept failure before we even begin. We hear those words and immediately feel the weight of inadequacy. How can I possibly love someone who betrayed me? How can I feel compassion for the person who destroyed my family, ruined my career, or caused me unspeakable pain? And so we try, through gritted teeth and forced prayers, to manufacture feelings that simply won't come. We tell ourselves we're supposed to forgive, that it's what good people do, that God expects it of us. But deep down, the resentment remains, sometimes for years, sometimes for decades, eating away at our peace like acid, slowly dissolving metal. What if the person you hate the most is actually your greatest teacher, and the rage you carry toward them is the very thing blocking you from the transformation you've been desperately seeking? Has this ever happened to you? You wake up in the middle of the night, and before you're even fully conscious, their face appears in your mind. The person who wronged you, the one who gets to live rent-free in your thoughts, occupying space in your mental landscape that should belong to joy, creativity, or rest. You've tried everything. You've prayed for the strength to let go. You've read books about forgiveness. You've attended workshops, sought counsel, repeated affirmations. Yet that heavy stone of resentment sits in your chest, unmoved by all your efforts. But before we begin, please hit the like button and let me know where in the world you're watching from today. It's always fascinating seeing who's joining us from around the world. And if you haven't already, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any of our future videos. Here's what almost no one tells you about Jesus' teaching on loving enemies. It was never meant to be a moral command at all. Stay with me until the end of this exploration, because what you're about to discover might completely revolutionize not just how you see that person who hurt you, but how you understand your own essential nature. What if Jesus wasn't asking you to force yourself to feel differently? What if he was pointing toward a recognition so profound that once you truly see it, loving your enemies becomes the most natural response in the world, not through moral effort, but through a fundamental shift in how you perceive reality itself? The teaching isn't about suppressing your natural reactions or pretending you feel something you don't. It's about discovering something about consciousness, about identity, about what you and your enemy actually are beneath the surface drama of human conflict. And this discovery, when it moves from intellectual understanding to lived experience, doesn't just transform your relationship with the people who've hurt you. It transforms everything about how you move through the world, how you experience yourself, and what becomes possible when you're no longer carrying that crushing weight of unresolved resentment. What truly changes inside you when you finally grasp why Jesus said these words isn't what you think. The conventional approach to this teaching has been trapping sincere seekers for centuries. And you've probably experienced this trap yourself without even realizing it. Religious tradition tells you that forgiveness is a moral obligation, something you must do because it's right, because God demands it, because your salvation might depend on it. So you stand there, facing the memory of betrayal or the presence of someone who's caused you genuine harm, and you try with everything in you to manufacture feelings of love and compassion. You repeat the words, you go through the motions, you pray for the strength to feel what you think you're supposed to feel. But here's the hidden truth behind why. This never quite works. Every single time you try to force yourself to love an enemy through sheer willpower, you're actually reinforcing the very separation you're trying to overcome. Think about what's happening in that moment. You're confirming that this person is fundamentally other than you, fundamentally opposed to your well-being, fundamentally your enemy. The harder you push yourself to generate love through moral effort, the more you cement the belief that love is absent from the situation and must be artificially created through discipline and religious duty. This is exhausting, and it's why so many people carry guilt about their inability to truly forgive. You think you're failing at a divine command, when in reality, you're simply trying to approach transformation from a level that can never produce genuine change. The mindset you're operating from treats forgiveness as an action you perform, rather than a recognition that emerges when you see clearly. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic by exploring what Jesus was actually revealing through these words. He wasn't handing you a moral assignment to complete through effort. He was pointing toward something far more revolutionary, a recognition that dissolves the entire concept of enemy at its root. When Jesus said to love your enemies, he was inviting you to see reality the way he saw it, to recognize that the consciousness looking through your eyes and the consciousness looking through your enemies Eyes are not two separate, opposing forces locked in eternal conflict. There is one divine consciousness manifesting through infinite forms, and what you call your enemy is simply this same consciousness temporarily expressing through a wounded, confused, fearful personality. The person who hurt you hasn't become something fundamentally different from what you are. They've simply forgotten their true nature and are acting from that forgetting, from pain, from fear, from patterns inherited through generations of unconsciousness. This recognition changes everything, because love for enemies stops being something you have to manufacture and becomes something that naturally emerges when you see the shared essence beneath conflicting surface expressions. The transformation happens not through forcing yourself to feel differently, but through seeing truly what both you and your enemy actually are beneath the temporary drama of human conflict. If something in this resonates with your own journey, write in the comments, "I've been trying to force it." This is the precise point where everything transforms from an impossible moral demand into a natural recognition that changes your entire experience of reality. The Christ consciousness that Jesus embodied, that awareness of unity with the divine, that unshakable peace regardless of external circumstances, was never his exclusive possession. It's the fundamental reality of what every being is beneath personality, beneath history, beneath behavior, beneath all temporary human experience. Your enemy, the person who betrayed you or caused you unspeakable pain, hasn't done anything that changes their essential nature as an expression of divine consciousness. Their harmful behavior flows entirely from forgetting this truth, from identifying completely with wounded ego and reactive patterns inherited through generations of pain. But beneath all of that, beneath the anger and the hurt and the defensive walls, the same infinite awareness that looks through your eyes also looks through theirs. This isn't poetic language designed to make you feel better. This is the literal truth about the nature of consciousness itself. And when you see it clearly, everything about how you relate to conflict transforms instantly. Joel Goldsmith, the spiritual teacher whose insights have transformed countless lives, discovered this truth in the most unexpected way. He didn't find it through years of studying scripture or following elaborate moral teachings. The breakthrough came in moments of deep stillness, when the constant mental noise finally quieted and something deeper could be seen. In that silence, he recognized with absolute clarity that the people he'd been struggling to forgive, the situations that had triggered his deepest resentment and judgment, were all expressions of the one consciousness that he himself was. This recognition didn't require him to approve of harmful behavior or pretend that real wrongs hadn't occurred. The impact of what he saw was far more profound than that. It simply revealed that beneath every surface conflict, beneath every human drama, there was no actual separation at the level of essential identity. The person who had wronged him wasn't fundamentally other, wasn't a separate entity opposed to his well-being. They were consciousness itself, temporarily lost in identification with fear and limitation, acting from wounds they didn't understand, perpetuating patterns they'd inherited without awareness. If what we've explored today resonated with you, I'd be honored to have you subscribe. Hit that button so you don't miss future content that continues building on this recognition. This recognition dissolves resentment not through moral effort, but through seeing what's actually true. When you recognize that your enemy is consciousness itself, temporarily confused about its own nature, how can you continue to hate? The hatred doesn't get suppressed or transcended through discipline. It simply evaporates in the light of this understanding, the way darkness disappears the moment you turn on a light. The transformation happens at a level far deeper than emotion or thought, at the level of fundamental perception about what reality actually is. And once this shift occurs, once you've genuinely seen this truth even for a moment, you can never quite return to the old way of perceiving conflict. Something essential has changed in how you understand both yourself and those you once called enemies. If you've had glimpses of this deeper truth, write in the comments, "I see beyond the surface." When this recognition shifts from being just an interesting intellectual concept to becoming your actual lived experience, something genuinely miraculous begins unfolding in your daily life. Resentments that you've been carrying for years, maybe even decades, suddenly lose their grip on you. And this doesn't happen because you've finally mustered enough willpower to let them go, or because you've performed some perfect forgiveness ritual. It happens because you've seen through the illusion that created those resentments in the first place. The person you've been calling your enemy is revealed as a confused expression of the same consciousness you are, and once you see this clearly, the entire foundation of your anger collapses. How can you remain furious at someone when you recognize them as a temporarily lost version of yourself, acting from wounds they don't understand, perpetuating patterns they never chose? The anger doesn't get pushed down or transcended through heroic moral effort. It simply dissolves in the light of this recognition, the way darkness instantly disappears the moment you flip on a light switch. There's no struggle involved because you're not fighting against your natural reactions anymore. You're seeing reality differently, and that shift in perception naturally transforms how you feel. This explains why every previous attempt at forgiveness probably felt so exhausting and ultimately unsuccessful. You've tried before, haven't you? You've sat there determined to forgive, repeating the words, going through the motions, praying for the strength to let go. And maybe you achieved some temporary relief, some surface-level peace that lasted a few days or weeks before the resentment crept back in. That's because forgiveness, approached as a moral duty you must perform, keeps you trapped in the very separation you're trying to heal. You're attempting to bridge a gap between yourself and an enemy who remains fundamentally other in your perception, fundamentally separate from who you are. It's like trying to connect two sides of a canyon by stretching yourself across the chasm through sheer determination. The effort is genuine, but the underlying paradigm makes success impossible. When you recognize the shared consciousness beneath conflicting personalities, forgiveness stops being something you do and becomes something that naturally emerges when you see truly. You're not pardoning someone separate from yourself anymore. You're recognizing that at the deepest level, at the level of essential being, there was never actually anyone separate to forgive in the first place. The wound was real, the behavior was real, the consequences were real, but the fundamental separation between you and your enemy was always an illusion created by identification with temporary personality rather than eternal consciousness. This distinction might seem subtle, but its impact on your inner experience is revolutionary. The burden you've been carrying doesn't require years of therapy or spiritual practice to dissolve. It requires seeing what's actually true about the nature of consciousness, and once you see it, you can't unsee it. If this understanding is beginning to shift something in you, write in the comments, "I'm ready to see differently." The practical impact of this recognition extends directly into your most challenging relationships, the ones that have been sources of pain and frustration for years. That family member who's been pushing every button you have for decades suddenly appears differently to you. You still see their behavior patterns clearly. You're not blind to the dysfunction or the cycles they keep repeating, but you also begin seeing something you couldn't see before. You see the wounded child beneath the defensive reactions, the fear driving the aggression, the divine consciousness beneath the confused personality, desperately trying to protect itself the only way it knows how. This shift in perception doesn't mean you suddenly accept abuse or maintain unhealthy boundaries. That's a crucial distinction many people miss when they first encounter these teachings. Recognizing someone's essential nature doesn't require you to tolerate harmful behavior or sacrifice your well-being. What it means is that you respond from clarity and compassion rather than from reactive anger and hurt. You can address harmful behavior, set firm boundaries, even remove yourself from toxic situations, all while not carrying the poison of resentment in your system. You're seeing the behavior as separate from essential identity, and that separation creates space for wise action rather than reactive patterns. Joel Goldsmith gave this quality a name that confuses people when they first hear it: divine indifference. The term sounds cold, doesn't it? It sounds like you're becoming detached, uncaring, emotionally numb to the suffering around you. But that's the exact opposite of what this actually describes. Divine indifference isn't about not caring. It's about discovering a profound inner stability that comes from recognizing your peace cannot be destroyed by anyone's behavior, because it's rooted in consciousness itself, not in circumstances. You care deeply about people and situations, perhaps more deeply than you ever have before, but you're not destabilized by them anymore. You can witness harm without being consumed by hatred. You can address wrongs without being overtaken by vengeance. You remain anchored in the recognition of what everyone truly is beneath their temporary expressions. And that anchoring gives you access to wisdom and compassion that reactive emotion could never produce. Think about what this means for how you move through your daily life. The colleague who undermines you at work still behaves the same way, but their actions no longer trigger that familiar spiral of anger and rumination that used to consume your evenings and weekends. The family gathering where that one relative always makes cutting remarks becomes something you can navigate with grace, because you're no longer taking their words as attacks on your essential being. You see them clearly, you respond appropriately, but you're not carrying their confusion as your burden. This is what living from recognition looks like in practical terms. It's not about becoming perfect or never feeling hurt. It's about discovering a foundation that remains stable regardless of the storm. And from that stability, entirely new responses become available to you. If you're beginning to experience this inner stability, write in the comments, "My peace is not dependent." The question that naturally arises is, how do you actually live from this recognition in the middle of ordinary life? When someone cuts you off in traffic and rage flashes through your body, when a colleague betrays your trust and every cell screams for revenge, how do you access this consciousness in those heated moments? Joel Goldsmith offered something beautifully practical that anyone can use immediately. He called it maintaining a listening attitude throughout your day. It's not complicated, and it doesn't require you to retreat to a meditation cushion for hours. When you encounter someone who triggers anger or judgment, you simply pause for just a breath and silently acknowledge this truth. The Christ that I am recognizes the Christ that you are beneath this behavior. You're not trying to manufacture warm feelings toward them or approve of their actions. You're not pretending that what they did is acceptable. You're simply recognizing the truth about their essential nature beneath the surface confusion. This subtle practice, repeated consistently in those triggering moments, gradually shifts your center of gravity from reactive personality to stable consciousness. It's like training a muscle. Each time you pause and make this recognition, you're strengthening your ability to see beyond the surface drama to what's actually true. If this resonated with you, leaving a like helps this message reach others who might be ready for this recognition. Let me share a story that illustrates just how powerful this shift can be when it moves from concept to lived experience. Sarah had been carrying rage toward her father for 30 years. The abuse she'd suffered as a child had shaped every relationship in her adult life, creating patterns of distrust and defensive walls that kept genuine intimacy at a safe distance. She'd done years of therapy, and it had helped her understand the patterns, helped her name what had happened to her, helped her see how the trauma had influenced her decisions. But the anger remained, burning in her chest like a fire that never quite went out. When Sarah first encountered these teachings about recognizing consciousness beneath personality, her initial reaction was dismissal and even anger. How dare anyone suggest she should see her abuser differently? But something beneath her resistance recognized a truth in these words that went beyond moral platitudes. She began, tentatively at first, to practice seeing her father not as the monster who had harmed her, but as a deeply wounded person whose own unhealed pain had expressed itself as abuse. This recognition didn't excuse his behavior or erase the impact of what he'd done. The wounds were real, the consequences were real, and nothing about this practice minimized that truth. But what it did do was release her from the prison of resentment she'd been living in for decades. The peace that emerged wasn't something she achieved through moral effort or positive thinking. It was what naturally arose when she saw truly, when she recognized that the person who had hurt her was consciousness itself, lost in patterns of pain inherited through generations. If you've experienced or witnessed this kind of transformation, write in the comments, "Recognition sets me free." There's a crucial distinction here that many people miss when they first encounter this teaching, and it's important to address it directly, because without this clarity, the entire message can be misunderstood in dangerous ways. Recognizing the divine consciousness in everyone does not mean you accept abuse, maintain toxic relationships, or fail to address harmful behavior. This is not a teaching about becoming a doormat or allowing yourself to be victimized in the name of spiritual enlightenment. Jesus himself overturned tables in the temple when he witnessed exploitation. He spoke truth to power. He confronted injustice directly. Loving your enemies means seeing their essential nature clearly while responding wisely to their behavior. These two things are not in conflict. You can maintain firm boundaries with someone while recognizing their spiritual wholeness. You can remove yourself from a destructive relationship while still seeing the confused consciousness beneath the harmful actions. You can work actively to stop injustice, to protect the vulnerable, to hold people accountable for their behavior, all while seeing the humanity in those perpetrating harm. The recognition doesn't lead to passive acceptance or spiritual bypassing, where you pretend everything is fine when it clearly isn't. It leads to wise, compassionate action that addresses harm without generating more suffering through hatred and vengeance. You respond from clarity rather than from reactive emotion, and that clarity often produces far more effective action than rage ever could. When you begin consistently living from this recognition, something remarkable starts happening in the world around you that extends far beyond your personal transformation. People feel something different in your presence, even when they can't articulate exactly what has changed. Your refusal to participate in cycles of judgment and retaliation create space for others to step out of those patterns too. It's as if you're holding open a doorway that others didn't even know existed. You become a presence that silently reminds people of their own essential nature, not through preaching or trying to convince them of anything, but simply through the quality of awareness you're maintaining. This isn't about trying to change people or fix them, which would just be another form of judgment suggesting they're broken and need your help. It's about maintaining awareness of what they truly are beneath their confusion, and that awareness itself creates an atmosphere where their highest qualities can naturally emerge. You're no longer feeding the drama of separation with your reactions. You're not adding fuel to the fire of conflict. You're anchoring something deeper in every interaction, a stability and peace that others can feel, even if they don't understand its source. The impact ripples outward in ways you'll never fully see or measure, touching lives in the hidden corners where genuine transformation happens. If you've noticed this shift in how people respond to your presence, write in the comments, "Others feel the difference." The ultimate transformation that occurs when you truly grasp this teaching isn't what most people expect. It's not that you become better at loving enemies or develop some superhuman capacity for forgiveness. The real shift is far more profound than that. You stop having enemies altogether. Not because everyone around you suddenly starts treating you well, or because conflict magically disappears from your life, but because you've seen through the fundamental illusion that anyone could be opposed to you at the level of essential being. Conflicts still arise in your experience. Disagreements happen, harmful behavior occurs, people still act from confusion and pain, but you're no longer relating to them as enemies, as fundamentally other, as threats to your existence. You're seeing confused expressions of consciousness, wounded personalities acting from pain and fear they don't fully understand, temporary forgetting of essential nature that shows up as harmful behavior. This shift doesn't make you naive or vulnerable to manipulation. It actually makes you more clear, more compassionate, and genuinely free from the suffering that comes from carrying hatred and judgment like heavy stones in your backpack. You can see harmful patterns more clearly because you're not blinded by reactive emotion. You can respond more effectively because you're acting from wisdom rather than from the need to defend a threatened ego. What Jesus was offering in this teaching wasn't a moral burden to carry or an impossible standard designed to make you feel inadequate. It was an invitation to recognize what you actually are beneath personality, beneath emotion, beneath all temporary human experience. When you know yourself as consciousness itself, rather than identifying primarily as a vulnerable personality constantly threatened by others, love for everyone becomes the natural expression of that recognition. Not sentimental emotion or forced affection that you manufacture through effort, but recognition of shared essence beneath all surface differences. This recognition is available to you right now in this moment. It's not something you need to develop through years of spiritual practice or meditation retreats. It's not a state you achieve after accumulating enough moral merit or religious devotion. It's what's already true about you, simply waiting for your awareness to discover it. The Christ consciousness that Jesus embodied, that capacity to love enemies, isn't his exclusive possession locked away in ancient history. It's your fundamental nature right now, and every single person who has ever harmed you or opposed you is that same consciousness temporarily lost in confusion. When you see this clearly, when this recognition becomes your lived reality rather than just an interesting idea, the entire landscape of human relationship transforms before your eyes. What was a battlefield becomes a classroom. What was endless conflict becomes endless opportunities for recognition. If you're beginning to sense this freedom emerging in your own experience, write in the comments, "I have no enemies." If you've made it this far in our conversation, I want to acknowledge something significant. You're not here by accident. There's a reason this message found you at this particular moment in your journey. The recognition we've been exploring together isn't just interesting spiritual philosophy to add to your collection of ideas. It's pointing toward the deepest truth about what you are. And something within you already knows this. That's why you're still here, still listening, still allowing these words to resonate with whatever is awakening in your awareness. I create content like this every week, diving into these transformative principles that have the power to completely reconfigure how you experience life and relationships. If what we've explored today resonated with you, if something shifted in your understanding, I'd be honored to have you join this community of people who are waking up to their true nature. Hit that subscribe button so you don't miss future explorations that continue building on what we've discovered together today. And here's how I'll know you made it all the way through. Write in the comments, "This message found me." When I see that, I'll know you received what was meant for you in this moment. Your comment also helps this video reach others who might be ready for this recognition, creating ripples that extend far beyond what we can see. If you found value in this perspective, leaving a like helps tremendously. It's a simple way of saying this matters, and it ensures that others who need to hear this will find their way here exactly when they're ready. There's a video right here that takes this understanding even deeper into practical application. It explores how consciousness transforms not just conflict, but every dimension of your daily experience. Click and continue with me over there. I think you'll find it's the perfect next step on this journey we're taking together. The consciousness that you are has always been whole. I'm simply grateful to walk alongside you as you remember what you've always known. When the consciousness awakens to the realization of I am, life ceases to be a series of random experiences and begins to unfold as divine order. The outer world, once seen as a mixture of chance and struggle, becomes transparent, revealing the invisible hand of spirit shaping every moment. The discovery of I am is not the gaining of power over life. It is the dissolving of the illusion that life ever needed control. It is the quiet recognition that all that you seek already is within the depth of your being. The mind that once ran toward things begins to rest. You no longer strive for peace. You are peace. You no longer search for love. You are love. You no longer demand abundance. You are the very expression of infinite sufficiency. The I am is the still center of the universe, and as you live from it, all appearances of limitation fade as morning mist before the sun. What changes is not the outer scene, but the awareness through which you behold it. And in that new vision, every form begins to reveal its true substance, God manifesting as life, as harmony, as wholeness. When you say, "I am tired, I am poor, I am afraid," you unknowingly claim limitation. But when you rest in the pure I am without attaching any description, you return to the fountainhead of being where nothing is lacking. In that sacred silence, the false identity dissolves, the self that struggles, competes, and fears, and what remains is the effortless flow of grace. You become a witness to life, not its victim. You find that all things necessary to your fulfillment come gently, without strain, because they were never separate from you. To live from I am is to live without resistance. It is to walk through the world with open hands and a quiet heart, knowing that the same presence which sustains the stars breathes through you. You begin to see God not as something to reach for, but as the very essence of your own awareness. This realization does not change the world, it changes the one who sees the world. And through that inner transformation, the outer begins to reflect the peace that was there all along. For when you fully embrace the power of I am, you find that nothing truly needed to change, only your recognition that you already are that which you sought to become. Awakening to divine identity, realizing the truth of I am, awakens you to your divine nature. Life is no longer random or chaotic, but an expression of divine order unfolding through consciousness. Transformation through awareness, not circumstance. True change does not occur in outer conditions, but in inner awareness. Once consciousness shifts, the world mirrors that inner peace and harmony. The end of striving. When you live from the awareness of I am, you stop chasing after peace, love, and abundance, because you are the very source of these qualities. Freedom from limitation, every label attached to I am, such as I am tired or I am afraid, limits the infinite self. Returning to the pure I am dissolves those illusions and reveals the boundless nature of being. Union with the presence. To embrace I am is to recognize God as the essence of your own awareness. You no longer seek the divine outside yourself. You live as the expression of divine life, moving effortlessly in harmony with all creation. Awakening to the realization of I am is the quiet moment when the veil between the visible and invisible world thins, and you begin to sense that life is not happening to you, but through you. It is a turning within, a sacred recognition that your true identity is not the personality, the history, or the name by which the world knows you. Beneath all those passing forms, there is a silent awareness that simply is. That presence, the I am, has never been born, never changed, never suffered, and never died. It is the same life that animates the universe, breathing through you as its perfect expression. When this awareness dawns, a profound peace begins to flow, because you realize that the self you once tried so hard to protect or improve was never the real you. Before this awakening, life appears as a sequence of opposites: gain and loss, joy and sorrow, success and failure. You live reacting to conditions, believing they determine your state of being. But once you touch the truth of I am, the axis shifts. You discover that outer events are mirrors reflecting the inner state of consciousness, not the other way around. The outer cannot define the inner. Only the inner gives meaning to the outer. The people, circumstances, and experiences around you become the language through which divine intelligence speaks to you. Every challenge becomes an invitation to remember who you truly are, to rest again in the awareness that no condition can alter the essence of your being. As you awaken to this realization, the sense of separation begins to fade. You no longer see yourself as one person among many, struggling for survival or recognition. You begin to perceive the unity of all life, the divine thread running through every living form. You sense that the same life that beats in your heart moves the oceans, opens the flowers, and turns the stars in their silent rhythm. This awareness brings with it a compassion that needs no effort, for when you look upon another, you no longer see someone else. You see the one life appearing in a different form. The barriers of judgment, competition, and fear lose their meaning because you know that what you do to another, you do to yourself. Living in this consciousness does not remove you from the world, it transforms how you experience it. The noise and haste of daily living remain, but something within you stands still amid the motion. You begin to meet every moment as it comes, not as an interruption or obstacle, but as an unfolding of divine order. You start to understand that the rhythm of your life is guided by something infinitely wise, something that cannot make mistakes. This realization does not require effort. It comes through surrender. The ego no longer tries to direct life, it yields to the presence that knows the way. In the light of I am, even the idea of personal accomplishment fades. You see that the talents you express, the thoughts that arise, the love you share, are not yours to claim, but gifts of the infinite flowing through you. Gratitude replaces pride, and humility replaces striving. You live with open hands, receiving what each moment brings and releasing it just as freely. There is a deep contentment in knowing that you are not the doer, but the instrument through which divine life sings its melody. This awakening is not achieved through study or discipline alone. It happens in stillness, when you stop searching for something outside yourself and turn inward to the quiet awareness that has been present all along. In that stillness, you hear the whisper of the eternal saying, "Be still and know that I am." And in that knowing, all fear dissolves, for you realize that you have never been apart from the source. You are that which is, and always has been, pure, unchanging, and whole. True transformation does not occur in the shifting scenes of the outer world, but in the awakening of inner awareness. The mind is accustomed to believing that change must be achieved through effort, by altering circumstances, people, or conditions, but this belief is born from forgetfulness of one's divine center. When consciousness is rooted in the awareness of I am, life begins to unfold differently. Outer experiences may still appear to rise and fall, yet they no longer define you. What once brought anxiety or joy becomes merely an image passing before the stillness of your being. You begin to see that the real revolution is not of events, but of perception. When awareness deepens, the same world is seen through new eyes. The problems that once demanded correction lose their urgency because they no longer hold power over you. They are seen for what they truly are, temporary projections of thought without substance apart from your attention. In that quiet recognition, a great peace arises. You no longer rush to fix appearances, for you know that every form, pleasant or painful, is a shadow of consciousness itself. As the light within grows brighter, the shadows rearrange themselves without effort. This is the mystery of spiritual transformation. The outer follows the inner as naturally as a reflection follows the movement of light. The ego lives in the realm of opposites. It measures progress by visible results, clings to control, and fears uncertainty. But once you begin to live from the awareness of I am, a higher rhythm takes over. You are no longer bound by reaction, you become a witness. You realize that every event carries a hidden blessing, a message from the divine intelligence that governs all things. What you once called failure becomes a doorway to humility and trust. What you once called delay becomes preparation. What you once called loss reveals itself as liberation. The outer experience remains, but your inner vision transforms it into revelation. This shift in consciousness changes the way you move through life. Instead of struggling to mold reality, you allow it to unfold according to divine law. You act when inspired, but your actions no longer arise from fear or ambition. They flow from a sense of quiet knowing. The more you trust this unseen order, the more harmony reveals itself in visible form. Relationships become gentler. Work becomes an expression of service rather than striving, and even challenges become part of a sacred dance designed to awaken you further. You discover that life has never been against you. It has always been guiding you toward awareness of your own divine nature. To live from this realization is to become transparent to spirit. The inner light no longer flickers with emotion or doubt, but shines steadily, illuminating every aspect of experience. When conflict appears, you no longer meet it with resistance, but with understanding. When sorrow visits, you do not deny it, but allow it to pass through the heart, knowing that the presence behind it remains untouched. Transformation, then, is not an event that happens once, but a continuous unfolding, a deepening recognition that all appearances come and go, while the awareness of I am abides unchanged. This is why true change cannot be forced. It blossoms naturally as you rest in the stillness of being. The outer world reorganizes itself in harmony with your inner peace. You do not make it happen, you allow it to happen. Every moment of acceptance, every pause in judgment, every act of surrender opens the door wider for grace to enter. Slowly, gently, you realize that the power you sought to control the world was never needed. The world was always the mirror of your consciousness. When the mirror reflects love, understanding, and peace, the images it shows you are transformed, and thus, without effort, without struggle, life itself becomes the visible expression of the invisible truth you have found within. When you awaken to the awareness of I am, the endless striving that has filled your days begins to dissolve. The human mind has been conditioned to believe that peace, love, and fulfillment are rewards that must be earned through effort, struggle, and pursuit. You have been taught to search for meaning outside yourself, to seek approval, possessions, or achievements as proof of your worth. Yet all striving carries within it the unspoken belief that something is missing, that you are not already complete. When the realization of I am dawns, that belief falls away like a shadow exposed to the sun. You recognize that what you have been seeking was never apart from you. The very peace you chased was the essence of your own being. The love you longed for was the fragrance of your own heart. The abundance you worked for was the natural radiance of the infinite expressing through you. In that sacred awareness, a profound restfulness fills the soul. The compulsion to prove, to attain, or to become gives way to a deep contentment with being. You understand that life is not a race toward perfection, but a revelation of the perfection that already is. Every moment becomes whole in itself, needing nothing added or taken away. The energy once spent in struggle is transformed into stillness, and from that stillness, inspiration flows without strain. Actions continue, but they arise not from desire or fear. They unfold from the quiet knowing of divine rhythm. You no longer live as the doer, you live as the expression of the doing. This cessation of striving does not lead to passivity, rather it opens the way for effortless action. The body may move, words may be spoken, creations may emerge, but they come through you, not from you. You begin to experience what it means to be a channel of divine purpose rather than its originator. The mind that once demanded results now yields to the rhythm of the infinite. Success and failure lose their emotional grip because both are seen as passing waves upon the same ocean of consciousness. You no longer ask, "Will this bring me happiness?" For you have discovered that happiness is not a destination but your natural state when the seeking ends. As the awareness of I am deepens, even the smallest moments take on new meaning. Washing a dish, walking down a street, or listening to another becomes an act of presence. The sacred is no longer confined to temples or prayer, it lives in every breath. There is a lightness in the way you move through life because you are no longer carrying the burden of becoming. The need to fix, to plan, to control fades, replaced by a trust in the wisdom of life itself. Everything you once tried to achieve through willpower begins to unfold naturally when you no longer stand in the way. The universe responds not to your striving, but to your stillness, when the heart releases its grasp on outcomes. A higher order of abundance appears. You find that what is truly yours cannot be missed, and what leaves was never meant to stay. You cease chasing love because you recognize that love is not something you receive, but something you are. You cease seeking validation because the eternal I am within you needs none. You cease fearing lack because the source of all supply is inseparable from your being. In this state, gratitude flows effortlessly, not as a practice, but as a constant awareness of grace. To live without striving is to live in the rhythm of spirit. You rise each day not to conquer life, but to let it unfold through you. What once felt like effort now feels like expression. You begin to understand that fulfillment is not found in attaining what you desire, but in awakening to what you already are. And in that awakening, the restless motion of desire comes to rest in the peace of presence. The circle of seeking closes, and you stand at its still center, knowing that nothing was ever missing and nothing needs to be attained, for the fullness of life has always been contained in the simple truth: I am. Every thought you attach to the sacred I am becomes a seed that shapes your experience. When you say, I am tired, I am unworthy, I am afraid, you unknowingly claim those states as your own. You breathe life into limitation through the creative power of divine identity. The words may seem harmless, but consciousness takes them as truth, and the world reflects them back. Yet when you strip away every label, every description, and rest in the pure, unqualified I am, you return to the fountainhead of being. In that stillness, there is no weakness, no fear, no lack, only the boundless presence that is the essence of all life. You discover that you were never the limited self struggling to overcome the world. You were always the light through which the world is seen. To live in the awareness of the unconditioned I am is to free yourself from the tyranny of false identification. The mind has been trained to define itself by experiences, rich or poor, strong or weak, loved or unloved. But these are passing masks worn by the eternal self. When you cease to identify with them, you begin to witness life rather than react to it. This shift is subtle yet profound. It is like awakening from a dream in which you mistook the characters for yourself. You realize that the one who was struggling to become something better was never real. It was only the reflection of belief. The moment you drop those beliefs, the weight of struggle dissolves, and what remains is effortless being. This freedom is not gained through denial of experience, but through recognition of truth. When you say simply, "I am," without adding anything, you stand in the power of the infinite. You do not need to affirm health, wealth, or joy, for those are natural expressions of the divine presence that I am. The moment you rest in that awareness, everything unlike it begins to fade. Fear dissolves, not because you conquered it, but because the light of truth leaves no room for shadow. Lack disappears, not because you accumulated more, but because you awaken to the realization that the source of all already flows through you as your very life. In this state, language itself becomes sacred. You speak less, but each word carries weight, born from the silence of understanding. When you say, "I am peace," it is not an affirmation of something to be achieved, but an acknowledgement of what already is. When you say, "I am love," it is not a hope or desire, it is the truth of your being revealed. The words become instruments of creation, shaping reality through the vibration of awareness rather than effort. This is why the Masters taught that the misuse of "I am" is the root of suffering. To attach falsehood to it is to build illusions. To let it stand pure is to dwell in the kingdom of spirit. As this realization deepens, your relationship with the world changes completely. You no longer try to fix appearances because you know they are merely reflections of thought. Instead, you tend to the inner garden of awareness. Every time you remember "I am," you water the seed of truth, and it bears fruit in perfect order. Health blooms where there was discord, peace arises where there was confusion, abundance flows where there was fear of lack. Yet these changes come not as miracles imposed from above, but as natural consequences of alignment with reality. To live from the pure "I am" is to live beyond duality. You cease to be a seeker, for you have found the source. You cease to be afraid, for there is no second power to threaten you. You cease to strive for love, for you recognize yourself as its living expression. In this awareness, the self-made walls of limitation fall away and you stand free. Not because you became more, but because you remembered what you have always been. To embrace "I am" is to awaken to the truth that the presence you have been seeking outside, yourself, has been within you all along. For lifetimes, humanity has searched for God in temples, books, and distant heavens, yet all the while, the silent voice within has whispered, "Be still and know that I am." This realization does not come with thunder or revelation, but through a deep stillness that dissolves the illusion of separation. When the awareness of "I am" dawns, the idea of a God apart from you fades. You no longer speak to the divine as a beggar asking for gifts, but as a child awakening in its parent's embrace. You recognize that you and the presence are not two. You are the expression of the same infinite life that forms the stars, the oceans, and the breath moving gently through your chest. In this state of realization, prayer transforms. It ceases to be petition and becomes communion. You do not pray for things. You rest in the awareness that all things are already fulfilled in the infinite mind that is your own. The longing that once reached outward now turns inward and finds rest in the quiet joy of unity. The sense of absence dissolves, for how can that which is omnipresent be missing? You begin to live from the understanding that every act, every breath, every movement is the divine revealing itself as you. The boundaries between the sacred and the ordinary vanish. Washing the dishes becomes as holy as prayer. Walking down a street becomes a journey through the temple of life itself. When you live from this union, fear loses its foundation. The mind no longer trembles before uncertainty because it knows there is only one power, one presence, one life. You see that what you once called good or evil, joy or sorrow, were only different shades of the same eternal light. The belief in opposites dissolves, leaving only harmony. This is not denial of the world's appearances, but a recognition of their source. You begin to perceive through the eyes of spirit, seeing perfection where the senses see chaos, wholeness where the world sees lack. In that vision, forgiveness becomes natural because there is no longer an other to forgive, only the one presence expressing itself in countless forms. This awareness brings about a profound humility. You realize that you are not the author of your life, but the instrument through which the infinite plays its melody. Every gift, every word, every act of kindness flows not from personal will, but from the silent abundance of spirit moving through you. The ego, which once claimed ownership of good and blamed others for evil, yields to the quiet realization that all is God in expression. There is no pride in achievement, no guilt in failure, for the doer has disappeared. What remains is surrender, not as resignation, but as joyous participation in the unfolding of divine order. As you live in this state of oneness, even time begins to lose its grip. The past no longer binds, and the future no longer threatens, because the eternal now becomes your home. You rest in the realization that life is not a journey toward God, but the eternal unfolding of God as life itself. Every heartbeat, every sunrise, every breath becomes a reminder that the presence you call divine is not something to be attained, it is the essence of your being. When the awareness of I am is fully embraced, the world no longer appears as something to conquer or escape, but as something to behold. You walk through it gently with eyes open and heart still, knowing that everywhere you look, you see only one life, one infinite, boundless, loving presence expressing itself through all things. You live not as a seeker, but as the seen, not as the worshipper, but as the revelation itself. And so, when you come to the full realization of I am, life no longer feels like a path to be conquered, but a presence to be lived. You cease reaching outward for signs of completion, for within you rests the wholeness that no circumstance can grant or take away. The battles of the mind fall silent, and what remains is the gentle rhythm of spirit breathing itself as you. Every moment becomes sacred, not because of what it brings, but because of the awareness through which it is seen. You begin to walk through the world not as one seeking truth, but as truth revealed, not as one demanding light, but as the very light that illumines all things. In that quiet knowing, you discover that nothing needs to be added, nothing needs to be removed. The outer world reflects your inner peace, and life itself becomes the living testimony of divine order. The power of I am is not something to attain, it is the eternal song already singing within the soul, waiting only to be heard. When at last you listen, the search ends, and you rest in the timeless grace of being, where all is one, all is whole, and all is forever held in the silent beauty of I am.